Picture this. It is too early in the afternoon, you had a highly productive morning, you knocked out a few meetings, and you grabbed a quick lunch, maybe a sandwich, a seemingly harmless bowl of pasta, or just a muffin and a coffee because you were in a rush. You sit back down at your desk, ready to conquer the second half of the day. And then it hits you.
The invisible wall.
Exactly, the wall. Your eyes start to glaze over. That email you are trying to write suddenly feels like you are trying to translate ancient Greek. You feel a wave of irritability. Your focus shatters. And what is the very first thing almost all of us do in that exact moment? We blame ourselves. We sit there and think, I am just lazy today, or I lack discipline, or I just need to push through and get another double espresso.
Which is the greatest tragedy of modern work culture. We moralize a biological crisis. We treat a physiological crash as a character flaw. But the reality is far more fascinating and, honestly, a bit alarming. What if that afternoon fog, that sudden drop in motivation, has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower? What if it is entirely a crisis happening deep inside your bloodstream?
That is the exact mystery we are unraveling today. We are tracking down what we call the glucose ghost. It is this silent, unseen force that is quite literally hijacking your cognitive performance on a daily basis. We are talking about metabolic instability and how the modern brain is essentially suffocating while drowning in fuel.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the brain not just as a thinking machine, but as a biological organ with extreme, almost greedy energy demands. The human brain makes up only about 2% of our total body weight, but it consumes a staggering 20% of our body's glucose and oxygen.
So it is like a massive high-performance server room packed into a tiny closet.
Precisely. And just like a server room, it requires an incredibly stable, uninterrupted power supply. Neurons do not store energy well. They depend heavily on a tightly regulated, second-by-second delivery of glucose from the bloodstream. When that delivery is steady, the brain is a marvel of focus and clarity. But when that fuel supply fluctuates rapidly, the nervous system becomes metabolically stressed.
And that brings us to the core of the problem, right? Because our modern food environment is practically designed to create those rapid fluctuations. We are not giving the brain a steady stream of power. We are hitting it with lightning strikes.
We absolutely are. Think about a standard modern breakfast, a bowl of sweetened cereal, a bagel, or a pastry. These are ultra-processed carbohydrates and refined starches. When you consume them, they do not digest slowly. They shatter into glucose molecules almost instantly, flooding your blood vessels. Your blood sugar levels skyrocket.
Which feels good for about 20 minutes. You get that rush, that false sense of being awake.
Yes, but the body views this massive surge of glucose as a state of emergency. High blood sugar is toxic to your blood vessels, so your pancreas panics and releases a massive surge of a hormone called insulin. Insulin is like a fleet of biological dump trucks. Its job is to quickly clear that glucose out of the bloodstream and shove it into your muscles and liver.
But the problem is the body overreacts, doesn't it? The dump trucks take away too much.
Exactly. The insulin response is so aggressive that it clears out the glucose too fast, causing your blood sugar levels to plummet below baseline. You go from a massive high to a sudden, devastating low. And this brings us right back to the brain. Suddenly, that high-performance server room experiences a brownout. The nervous system is suddenly trapped in a state of unstable fuel dynamics.
So when my blood sugar crashes, my brain is literally experiencing a localized energy crisis. It is starving for fuel.
It is metabolically panicked. And when the brain loses metabolic stability, the first thing to go offline is your executive function. The prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain right behind your forehead, is highly sensitive to glucose drops.
And the prefrontal cortex is basically the CEO of the brain, right? It handles the high-level stuff. Focus, decision-making, impulse control, emotional regulation.
Exactly. It is the part of you that does deep work, the part that stops you from saying something you will regret in a meeting, the part that keeps you on task. Under metabolic stress, the CEO goes on strike. The brain realizes it does not have the energy for high-level, complex thought, so it shifts power to the older, deeper parts of the brain. It shifts toward reactive, short-term, survival-oriented processing.
Wow, so I am not just losing my focus, I am literally being downgraded to a more primitive operating system. I become mentally impulsive and cognitively fragmented.
You become a different version of yourself. When people experience that afternoon crash, they are not just tired, their decision-making slows down, their attention fragments, they become irritable. How many arguments, how many poor financial decisions, how many snapped replies to an email happen simply because someone's prefrontal cortex dimmed due to an insulin crash?
That is a profound thought. We think we are entirely in control of our actions and our moods, but we are actually at the mercy of the muffin we ate 3 hours ago. Unstable blood sugar is quietly sabotaging our highest level of thinking.
It is a profound realization. And the tragedy is that this does not just happen once a day. For many people, this is a continuous roller coaster. They wake up, eat a sugary breakfast, spike, and crash. They feel terrible, so they drink a sweetened coffee and eat a granola bar to wake up. Spike, crash. They eat a heavy pasta lunch. Spike, crash. Their nervous system is enduring this violent metabolic whiplash all day long.
Which sounds exhausting, but it also sounds like it must be doing some kind of long-term damage. If my blood vessels and my brain are constantly going through these extreme highs and lows, there has to be a biological cost, right?
There is a severe cost, and it comes in the form of silent inflammation. Repeated glucose volatility is highly inflammatory. When you constantly flood the system with sugar, it creates oxidative stress. It damages the delicate lining of your blood vessels, a condition known as endothelial dysfunction.
So it is like running dirty, highly combustible fuel through a delicate engine. Over time, it is going to leave residue and rust the pipes.
That is a perfect metaphor. The body experiences chronic metabolic friction, and because the brain relies on a vast microscopic network of blood vessels to deliver its fuel, vascular health is brain health. When you inflame those vessels through constant glucose spikes, you are slowly straining the nervous system. Over years and decades, this metabolic instability affects your insulin sensitivity, your memory, and your overall cognitive longevity. Modern cognition is essentially being slowly inflamed.
That is terrifying, but it makes so much sense. It explains why we feel so physically awful when we are on that roller coaster. But here's the part that always traps me, and I know it traps millions of others. When I hit that low, when the brain fog rolls in, I do not crave a salad. I do not crave a handful of almonds. My brain screams at me to go find the nearest chocolate bar or a bag of chips. Why is the brain working against us in that moment?
Because the brain is incredibly smart, but it is also very short-sighted when it feels threatened. This brings us to the behavioral reinforcement loop, or what we can call the dopamine trap. When your energy crashes, the brain sounds an alarm. It needs a quick correction. It knows, from past experience, that highly refined carbohydrates and sugar will provide instant, rapid energy.
So it sends out an intense craving. It is basically saying, get me sugar right now, or we are going to shut down.
Exactly. And when you give in to that craving and eat the sugar, your blood glucose spikes again, saving the brain from the perceived crisis. In response, the brain releases a massive surge of dopamine, the reward chemical. It essentially pats you on the back and says, "Great job, you saved us."
Oh, wow, so we are literally training our brains to become addicted to the roller coaster. We are caught in a biochemical compensation pattern. We feel bad, we eat sugar, we feel a dopamine high, we crash, and the cycle repeats.
Beautifully said. You become trapped in a loop of emotional eating and metabolic chaos. People think they lack discipline, but they are actually fighting a deeply ingrained survival mechanism that is being hijacked by modern ultra-processed food. You cannot out-willpower a neurochemical survival response.
So, if willpower is not the answer, what is? Because I refuse to accept that we are all just doomed to wander around in a reactive, brain-fogged state for the rest of our lives. How do we exercise the glucose ghost? How do we give the brain the stability it is begging for?
The encouraging reality is that the human brain performs remarkably well, almost like a superpower, when it is placed under stable metabolic conditions. If you can flatten the curve of your blood sugar, if you can turn those violent spikes and crashes into gentle, rolling hills, your cognitive clarity will transform.
So, focus is not just about trying harder. Focus is actually a byproduct of nutritional engineering.
Precisely. Stable glucose regulation supports sustained attention, mood stability, and mental endurance. And achieving this is entirely within our control. It comes down to how we compose our meals and structure our days. For example, prioritizing dietary fiber. Fiber acts like a net in your digestive system, slowing down the release of glucose into the bloodstream.
Right, so instead of the fuel dumping in all at once, it drips in slowly. A steady supply for the server room.
Exactly. Combining carbohydrates with healthy fats and high-quality protein does the exact same thing. It blunts the spike. Beyond food, simple movement is incredibly powerful. Taking a 10-minute walk after a meal allows your muscles to soak up excess glucose from the bloodstream without needing massive amounts of insulin.
Just 10 minutes of walking can change the way my brain functions 2 hours later.
Absolutely. Your muscles are glucose sinks. When you walk, they pull the sugar out of the blood, preventing the massive spike and the subsequent crash. Add in proper sleep, stress regulation, and eating in alignment with your circadian rhythm, and you create an environment where the nervous system thrives. You achieve metabolic consistency.
It is amazing how interconnected it all is. We tend to separate the mind and the body. We treat mental fatigue as a psychological issue and physical fatigue as a biological one. But they are the exact same thing.
They are completely inseparable. The brain is not floating in a jar. It is intimately connected to the metabolic machinery of the body. And this is exactly where the future of health intelligence is heading. We are entering an era where we will no longer guess about our cognitive health. We will monitor it through metabolic signals.
You are talking about things like continuous glucose monitors, right? Wearables that give you real-time data on what is happening in your bloodstream.
Yes, historically, CGMs were only used by diabetics, but now high performers, executives, and anyone interested in cognitive longevity are using them. Imagine looking at your phone and seeing that your blood sugar is rapidly dropping and knowing that is why you suddenly feel anxious or distracted.
That is the ultimate biofeedback. Instead of wondering why I'm having a bad day, I can look at my data and see, oh, my breakfast caused a massive spike and now I am crashing. I need to go for a walk and eat some protein, not drink another coffee.
Exactly. AI-driven metabolic analysis and personalized nutrition systems are transforming preventive medicine. Because a food that spikes my blood sugar might not spike yours, we all have unique metabolic fingerprints. The future of medicine will recognize that mental performance, emotional regulation, and cognitive endurance are fundamentally rooted in metabolic regulation.
It really shifts the entire paradigm of how we view ourselves. It makes me think about how much human potential is just being left on the table. Millions of brilliant ideas, deep conversations, and moments of focus are just being lost to the 3 p.m. crash.
It is a staggering societal cost, but it is also a message of profound hope. Because deep inside the bloodstream, tiny glucose fluctuations are dictating your focus, your emotion, your clarity, and your behavior. Once you understand that, you hold the keys to your own mind.
Perhaps so many people out there who think they are lazy or unmotivated or just burned out. Perhaps they never were. Perhaps their nervous systems were simply trapped inside invisible metabolic chaos.
And perhaps true mental performance begins not with more caffeine, not with more stimulation, and not with punishing yourself to work harder, but simply with metabolic stability.
Give the brain the right fuel at the right speed and watch what it can do. This has been a fascinating journey into the hidden mechanics of our minds. This is Oxyzen Health Intelligence.
Thank you for joining us.